Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundlesssuccess to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. A lot going on in the news, and we're going to focus on a major issue involving the political landscape. But before we do, let's look and sample some of the more, let's just say, less heavy things in the news. Some are heavy, some are not. The Jesse Smollett, he just settled a case. I can't tell you exactly what the settlement was for, but he's still claiming that he was set up. Talk about, this time it's not Trump derangement, but it's derangement. Career over as well, correct?
It's definitely derangement. I don't think there's anybody with half a brain that still believes he was attacked, especially when his attackers came out and said he paid them to do it. You know, this is not something that attackers tend to do. So
no, it doesn't happen often. And it is interesting, just real quick, because we're going to talk about the media a little later, but he was on ABC Good Morning, the weekly show that's, Good Morning ABC, whatever it's called, and a puffball interview, no probing discussion or questions. The interviewer, I forgot her name, she used to work for ESPN. She almost started crying. I'm so sorry for you, Jesse. It goes to show you, and we'll talk about, what's going on with the Biden situation. But we basically have a press that's asleep at the switch when it's not part of Trump derangement.
I think it's more than just being asleep at the switch. It goes back to how they're being educated. They're not being taught in journalism class how to do journalism, what the job of a journalist is. I think that they're basically being trained to be social media influencers, and that's what they think they are now.
It's interesting, just real quick. I know you went to a school for journalism, but we've also done terrestrial radio and the podcast for a number of years. And I find it interesting, to your point, I fully support what you just said, because I've seen many interviews and there's a question and then there's the answer, but the follow-up is, thank you very much for being on the show. No, and how did you arrive? I mean, basic, simple questions that, unlock further information or the truth. It's devoid in today's media.
Yeah, there's no follow-up. There's no point to these interviews. The reporters today do not understand how to get a story. Unless, of course, it's a gotcha story because unfortunately, thanks to Woodward and Bernstein, every reporter seems to think their job is to get the president. And it's like, no, your job is to uncover the truth. And they seem to have not been taught that or how to do that.
I think you bring an excellent point up. I think it did start with Watergate, that it went from even-handed journalism. It always shifted a little bit to the left, but Walter Cronkite. I mean, I suggest anyone in our audience go to YouTube and just look at it. Election results 1980 on NBC. It's shocking how down the middle it is. Okay. What's the point? I think it became activism journalism and heavily favored to the left after what it was. Gotcha, got the Republican, get the conservative journalism.
It's not that that's when it happened. It's that that's when it became obvious. That's when people started looking up to that kind of journalism. Journalism, unfortunately, has been like that for God knows how long. William Randolph Hearst basically said they'll believe what I tell them to believe. And Joseph
Hmm.
Pulitzer actually created the Pulitzer Prizes to make up for the fact that he was publishing all of this bullshit under the guise of journalism.
I agree with that. Hearst, yes, basically somewhat responsible for the Spanish American
Mhm.
War, all so on and so forth. But I think he actually could have been conservative. Yes, there's always been yellow journalism, but I now it's so slanted to the left, it cannot help but be traced to how they're educated. It's activism
Yes.
journalism.
Yeah,
And you look at
the
go ahead.
difference was back then you had different media outlets with different viewpoints, and you could look and see what was going on, because the reporters were actually trained to do journalism. And so even though the publisher would want a slant, the journalist still provided all of the facts. And it was the editorial pages that went off the rails. Now they don't even know how to do a story, so it's all slant.
I agree. I think the model you just articulated seems like it's in a time warp. I mean, they wouldn't even recognize it at this point. We did talk about Jesse Smollett about the end of a career. I think another end would be Comey in the 86-47. He went on Colbert, which is unwatchable, trying to rehabilitate. He just didn't know the 86 minutes often because his wife was in the restaurant business. So your thoughts is he pretty much well it was
Yep.
over anyway, but
The
not
that
good. Okay, okay, just one thing before you say yeah, forget about the rest. Just the complete lack of judgment disqualifies him from anything else.
is the former head of the FBI does not recognize a threat when he sees it. That's what his
Unbelievable.
story comes down to. So either
Hmm.
he is a complete liar and knew exactly what this meant, or this is the most monumental stupid person on the face of the planet and should never have been allowed in the FBI. Possibly
Could it be
both.
both?
Yes,
There you
possibly
go.
both.
Yes, he's done. I think he could be. I don't think he's going to get into trouble that he. If it was a regular civilian, they could be in real deep shit. That's a threat against the president. Everyone
Yeah.
knows what 86 means. It means
Yes,
to
and I
off
mean
someone.
the idea that he just happened to come across it also has no credibility.
Yeah, oh yeah, happens all the time.
Yeah.
Yes, I got one on the beach. I was walking in Jersey when I was visiting my friend, and it gave me directions to the exact bar that him and I were looking for. Just happened on the beach, the Shells, Fifth
Right.
and Main Street. There you go. It happens all the time. Um, Now, speaking careers, well, I don't think he ever had a career, but maybe life that is over. It's already over, but it's just going to get worse. Uh, Cash Patel is looking to relook at the White House cocaine incident, and it's been obviously in the news last couple of days. But I think it was Laura Ingram's show. I saw the tape, and I think we even talked. I know we talked about it during on Carnivore Bites, whatever, a couple of years ago. You see him on the balcony for the July 4th. That is Hunter, the July 4th celebration. He is coked out. Sorry, he's not. So I think again, it's not going well for Uncle Joe. I think it's not going to go well because I think they are going to relook at it, and I see there's I think a good chance that they'll pin it on Hunter.
Well, it's not just the cocaine. What Cash Patel is doing is going after all of the open cases from the last few years. So there's the cocaine in the White House. There is the Supreme Court leak about the Dobbs decision. There were a few other cases also in this. Now, these are all open cases. What all Cash Patel is saying is that they are now going to redouble their efforts to solving these cases because they feel under the previous administration they fell by the wayside. So this is something, it's not political. They're not going after Hunter Biden. They are trying to close out all of their open cases from the last few years. And quite frankly, nobody should have any problem with that because you want cases closed.
Yes, I would agree. But I'd like your, and I'm sure our listeners would as well. You're a very smart guy. How do you think, good reader of and great intuition, how do you think it is under the Delaware roof, under the Biden residency, the life with Hunter, with Joe and the doctor? Can't be going well because I've never seen shit hitting the fan like it is now. Usually, even
Well,
Jimmy Carter, he had a failed presidency, but there was no one was going after him. He went off into the sunset. He rebuilt his image and blah blah blah. The rest is this is just a total, just like his administration, a total disaster. Auto pens, and it's just unbelievable. And they even say that Uncle Joe might be broke.
well, there was talk about that even while he was president because of the legal bills and the fact that the Biden crime family had been outed, so nobody wanted to give the money anymore. Um, there was a lot of talk about the fact that he was leaving the White House, almost destitute. The fact of
Hmm.
the matter is, there is no Biden influence anymore. So there's nothing for the Biden family to sell. They are effectively out of business. So,
And
yeah,
let me interject just one thing real quick on that. Also, for you can go like Carter left underwater the White House. He just said he was due to various factors, but he resurrected his career to the point that he did speaking engagements. He did many things, right? Gerald Ford did the same thing. There is no speaking engagements unless it's a carnival for Uncle Joe. So there is no revenue in the future.
well, in,
Done.
in, in
Goodbye.
all fairness, Carter, Ford, Nixon, all of these past presidents that did speaking engagements left the White House capable of doing speaking engagements.
100%.
You'll
Yes.
notice, Ronald Reagan did not do speaking engagements when he left the White House because the dementia had already kicked in.
Hmm.
Biden's in that position. The idea that he can write a book, do a speech, it's beyond him now. And
I'm sorry, I disagree. He could write a book like you, I'm older than you, but our books in first grade were Flip, See, Flip, Run.
actually,
Possibly, correct?
I don't, at this point, I don't even think he could focus enough to do something like that. It takes
I
him
think you're
quite,
right.
it takes him quite a while to be able to make a public appearance. So far, every public appearance he's made since leaving office has been botched. And again, it takes, days and days of rest just to get him to do half an hour of talking. So I think
Yes,
any books or anything that come out with his name on them, they're obviously ghost written.
100%. And again, speaking of people and people's demise, we have two things to cue you up on. We talked about it, I think, a couple weeks ago. AOC is now clobbering Chucky in the polls over 20%. If they primaried, she would win decisively. And I also, has totally unrelated, but the slap saw seen around the world, Macron getting slapped by his much older wife. Let's take AOC first, Doctor.
Well, I think
Radicalization of the party.
there's the radicalization of the party, but honestly, any polls regarding AOC and Chuck Schumer are completely irrelevant. Chuck Schumer isn't up for reelection until 2029. The idea that
Hmm.
there's any poll that could be done today that'll have any kind of relevance in 4 years is ridiculous. Plus, AOC keeps shooting off her mouth. There's no way she's going to be able to maintain what she's doing now for 4 years. She's got to do.
Let me interject something on that because I disagree respectfully on that because with the normal, and we'll talk more about the state of the Democratic Party, which will be our focus on this podcast, today's podcast. But I think with the crazy Democratic Party, I think it might elevate her. The crazier you are, the better.
It'll
It's like
again,
a rock
it'll
concert. The louder you are, the more people like it.
yeah, but again, we're talking 4 years. She has to go through her own reelection next year, and we don't even know how that's going to go because her poll ratings in her own district, which are the only ones that matter for Congress, are not good. You have people coming out, diehard Democrats, saying they can't vote for her, they've got to get her out because since AOC took office, crime in New
Hmm.
York City is up 20%. Crime in her home district is up 70%. She doesn't care about the people that she's actually supposed to be representing. So,
She could
yes,
care less.
she could be doing really well in polls of the wacko left from across the country, but all that's going to matter are the folks back home, and she's not doing well there. On top of that, not only does she have to run for reelection of herself, she's been talking about running for president in 2028. Well, guess what? If she gets her ass handed to her in 2028, which while she may do well in a wacko primary, there's no way she's going to be able to sway independents across the country to vote for her in a general election. So she will do maybe as well as Kamala did at best. So once she
I
gets
would
her,
say it would be in the same league as McGovern,
yeah,
72, when he won
once she gets
D.C.
her ass handed to her in a if she tries to do that, Schumer's not going to care what she has to say on on the Senate side. And again, 4 years from now, Schumer's no spring chicken. There's no guarantee he's even going to run again.
Okay, but the reason I really brought it up is not that I really give a shit about Chuck Schumer or AOC. It's a good litmus test to where the Democratic mindset and orientation is. Crockett's the what's the Omar, who basically had no comment about the killing of two Jewish kids, young people, at the Jewish Museum. Yeah, so I think it is a litmus test to how crazy the Democratic Party is. And again, 6 years ago, 4 years ago, Lopkin, we would do it for effect. They're nuts. Or this is no effect. They're crazy. They
Yeah,
should be nowhere near leadership.
that's part of the problem right there is they have no leadership, they have no direction, they have no agenda in terms of policy anymore. Everything is focused on Trump derangement syndrome. So everything is, we have to stop Trump, we have to stop Trump. Well, guess what? Come 2028, that's not going to work because Trump's not going to be on the ballot. And yes, they will try to, whoever gets the Republican nomination, they will try to paint them as Trump's successor. But most, especially independent and centrist voters, are going to be looking at them going, yeah, you're campaigning against Trump. This person is not
And whoa,
Trump.
there's no reason to think. Hold on, there's no reason to think Trump might not be popular. I kind of saved this for our focus segment, but his insider advantage, a very reputable firm, has him at 55% approval, and Rasmussen, they're very conservative but very reliable, 50% say that the country's going in the right direction, a almost 30-year high. So there's no guarantee that Orange Man's going to still be bad. I think that shit's
Right.
fading, quite frankly.
Well, it is. We saw that last year in the 2024 election. The populace came out. I mean, let's not forget in 2016, Trump won the electoral but did not win the popular vote. In 2024, he won the popular vote. And every district in America shifted red. Even ones where Democrats won, they won by smaller margins than they ever had before. So again,
Yep.
the Democrats are focused on the wackos that they're calling their base, but that's going to cost them elections in the long run because these folks are not going to be able to carry national races.
I agree. What do you think of Macron? He's slapped seen all around the world. I bet, not that it's really newsworthy,
I,
or I really even, or maybe if our listeners give a shit. But yeah, the only thing I thought about it as a globalist, fake politician. I enjoyed him getting slapped. Also, an
hon-
anti-Israeli, anti-Semite. But anyway,
Honestly, I seem to remember him getting slapped a couple of times. And the same thing happened to the Italian prime minister a few years ago. I think this is just, European men being European men, and the wives are going, oh, hell no, and slapping them.
pretty much probably metaphors for the Democratic Party again in our focus segment. But we do, on a very serious note, the DC killing at the Jewish Museum um, shows you the degree of anti Semitism. There was someone, a Jewish person, who was at the museum during the shooting, and he was interviewed, well, he was loosely, by CNN, who had the agenda and conflate, protesters with the shooter. He goes, yes, I can. The same look that was in his eye was in the protesters' eyes. And I think it's a bigger picture of these students, so-called students, being indoctrinated by radical Islamic psychos at these so-called elitist institution, where Victor Hansen, is someone I really love, brilliant guy, said they've long abandoned their position as elite institutions due to DEI and other factors. But they're essentially places like Harvard are active breeding, not passive, active breeding grounds for anti Semitism. And what do you think is going to happen when you've had 20 years of anti Semitism, anti Israeli rhetoric?
Well, I mean, you're putting together parallels, based on a look, whatever. The links actually go a lot deeper. Okay, the person that pulled the trigger, Elias Rodriguez, has been linked to the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Now, this is a group that made a lot of headlines on October 7th, right after the attacks, because they praised the terror attacks and said it was about time. But this is also, this same group has been linked to funding these protests. So this is not a coincidence. It's not a matter of, oh, they had the same look in their eye. They're working for the same organizations. And let's
Okay, let me
also,
just interject one thing. I agree with you, but when I say look, it's not just a cosmetic observation.
right.
It's the indoctrination, the mindset. I think it's one and the same, and it's dangerous to the
Yes.
point that Alan Dershowitz, a long time associate employee, alumni, alum of Harvard, is basically he's basically uh, not really welcome there anymore. And close to the same museum in D.C., he'd have special security because now, as a Jew, a prominent Jew, and a pro Israel Jew, he's essentially has a target on his back in the United States. Scary.
Well, you're saying he's not welcome on the Harvard campus. That's putting it mildly. I saw an interview with him just this morning where he was talking about the fact that he has effectively been banned from the Harvard campus for the past 12 years. So,
Banned?
yes, they don't want
How
him
about freedom
on.
of speech?
Right. They don't, these institutions don't believe in freedom of speech unless you agree with them. How many times have we seen over the past decade conservative commentators, conservative speakers schedule events at these institutions only to be pulled at the last minute, be told it's not safe for them to be there. Let's face fact. I am a huge proponent of freedom of speech. I have spent decades fighting for freedom of speech. Attacking people is not freedom of speech. Firebombing is not freedom of speech. This is what's going on. And they seem to think that violent action is covered under freedom of speech. It's not. You can say whatever you want. And even that has limits, the famous limit that everybody knows: you can't yell fire in a crowded theater unless there's actually a fire. Well, this is not about freedom of speech. This is about harassment. This is about vandalism. This is about criminal behavior. And that's where the difference lies. Now, going back to the shooter, Rodriguez, not only has he been tied to the people who are paying for these protests, but his father was at Trump's address to the joint session of Congress as a guest of Representative Jesus Garcia, who is the Democratic representative of Illinois. So his family has ties to the Democratic Party.
Doesn't shock me in any way. Yes, we've talked about that before, and how the idiosyncrasies, to put it mildly, of Jewish voters actually still adhering to the Democratic ideology is just bizarre. Yes, I do think, though, it is interesting because I think sometimes payback's a bitch. Just as a neutral observer, and I'm just being as honest as I can, and we talked about this before on our podcast, that if I was in a hiring position, like I'm talking about, a director of a division, I would rather have people from good schools, okay, good schools, and I would not be all that enamored with the Ivy League from what I've seen. I think these people are ill prepared for real jobs. I really don't want them in my company, not because of anti Semitism. Well, that's obviously a factor. I don't think they're going to get along with regular people. I think they're entitled. I don't think they know shit. And I don't want them. I'd rather have someone from University of whatever, some school, some state school, that you get a smart person who's normal. Your thoughts?
Well, as someone who is in a position to hire, generally, I don't even look at resumes that come from the so called Ivy League anymore, because these are entitled individuals who, because they overpaid for a lackluster education, they're making salary demands that are completely out of touch with their abilities. And that's something that people seem to forget. When you go get a job, this is a trade. You are being paid for what you bring to the table. The fact that you have hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans is not the employer's problem. You are not going to get a salary that's going to cover all of that just because you need it. You have to prove that you can be of value to the employer. And the people in the Ivy Leagues are not being taught that. They're not being, in fact, even in some state schools, They're not being prepared anymore for the real workplace.
Whoa, 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 whoa! You're telling me the woman that I think graduated or got a scholarship at UConn, who was illiterate, wasn't prepared for the real world?
Yeah, exactly. This is what's going on.
Nah.
I would rather hire somebody right out of a 2-year college who's hungry, who wants to earn money, who wants to do a good job because they want to get ahead, they want to help their family, they want to help their community. I don't care what degree they have, and quite frankly, the one thing that's going to get a resume a quick trip to the circular file if it crosses my desk is an MBA.
What a, yeah, no, MBAs have taken companies that were totally viable and have destroyed them. And I have a friend who's a pretty big guy, high up in an advertising agency. I love what he said. He goes, "Be wary of the unintended consequences of an MBA. They could make painting a fence into a multi-week problem with several meetings and spreadsheets.
Yes.
Worthless.
Yes, I have.
Absolutely worthless."
Before I started my business, when I worked in corporate, I had in several different positions MBAs working beneath me. And the first thing I had to do with each of them is to retrain them to forget everything they learned in their MBA courses so that they could get along the way work really actually happens.
And I think that was, years ago. I would have to, my conjecture would be that it's much worse now in terms of relevant skills versus what they've actually been taught. I think it's huge. And what do you think of Trump basically pulling no contracts for Harvard and other Ivy League schools? And he suggested throwing that money to trade schools. And as he said, skills can actually help America, not Hamas.
He should be doing that. We need to put more money into trade schools. There is right now a shortage of welders. Okay, now you would think this is a relatively straightforward skill. You don't need 4 years of training to be able to do it. You can learn it in, there are numerous 2-year programs that train people to do welding. Now, how important is welding? Our entire defense of this country depends on welders to build planes, to build submarines, to build tanks. Everything we build depends on welders. Right now, the defense industry has a shortage of 230,000 welders. These are open positions right now that they can't fill.
May I interject one thought, one question? What do you think the shortage is of marketing managers?
None. There is no shortage
Zero.
of marketing
I'm
managers.
just
There's
throwing it
no,
out there. Yes.
yeah.
All right. Good
there's
one.
there's no
So
there's also no shortage of social media influencers. There's also no shortage of actors. Yeah,
no,
it's
no.
oh it's
Or
only
art
it's
history majors.
right. It's only the jobs that actually need to be done to ensure the survival of our country that we have a shortage of.
But looking at the individual, okay, because this is really interesting. I think a young person has an amazing opportunity because I do believe in education, and I think a school n- adjusting to the new realities also has a major opportunity. And I would propose a strategy for a school of higher education would be to combine some, I don't know what you want to call it, general education, some skills, some real skills. So you get a degree from XYZ college with a certificate in welding, and I'm not really making it up. So I think you would be so employable because people would think, wow, an educated person. So you have like 2 years, it's a 2 year degree. So you got, reading, some skills in other pertinent areas. And then you come out as certified as a welder. A lot better prospects than getting out with an undergraduate degree in marketing.
Not only are you not kidding about that, you're actually describing a program that exists. There is a
I didn't know that.
there is a community college program to train people in advanced manufacturing techniques. You graduate with a certificate and an associate's degree, and the salaries for these kids who generally leave with little or no debt whatsoever because community college is very affordable. With a little bit of overtime, you can be making $100,000 a year in your
To
first year
start.
out of college. Yes, that's the start. That's to start.
Now, let me ask you another question, Dr. Lopin. I agree. Great point. And I think schools that don't try to go in that direction will soon go the way of T Rex. Um, so you have that situation, okay? I wonder if when you look at it further on down, are these schools oblivious or is it part of the whole getting student loans and there's no reason to change? Like if you're getting your fix, why change? Why go off heroin?
I think it's a
So there's no
little
real market driven. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think it's a little from column A, a little from column B. Most of these institutions changing direction is like changing the direction of a battleship. It's a slow and plodding process, and most of them go, well, what we're doing now is working, so why bother? But the other part of it is they have become addicted to charging ridiculous amounts of money
Ridiculous.
for tuition. So you're not going to get somebody paying $125,000 a year to get a degree in welding. So
That's true.
they keep making up these programs, and in fact, despite the fact that hiring of MBAs is decreasing, the
Decreasing.
number of
Tell me.
MBA programs is actually increasing because they can convince people that, oh, the MBA is a great degree to have and it's worth every dollar, and they can charge more money for it.
I hate to break it to them. The 1980s are over. There you go. But I do think it's also, and I'd like your opinion on this. Um, I think the whole shtick of college. I remember I was in the library, just had to do some stuff, and these two younger people were talking. They went to Vassar and went to this and that. I mean, you tell me they went there, right? And I'm just thinking to myself, you're making like 30 grand, and you went to. I mean, obviously, maybe it's not really dovetailing, is it? What is my question? My question is, I think the prestige, the inherent prestige that has been with us for 70 years easily. Oh, where'd you go to school? I didn't go to school. You're out of the cocktail party. I think that train left the station. I would like your thoughts. Do you think it's true that no one gives
Yes.
a shit where you went to school? No one gives a shit you got a degree in art history, and no one really gives a shit. It's just there's no real prestige anymore.
No, there's no prestige left. And in fact, when somebody says, oh, I went to such and such a college, they're more likely to be met with the question, wow, how much in debt are you? Rather than any kind of appreciation or being impressed. And this has been going on for a while. You started seeing it with Gen Y because Gen Y took a look at the millennials. Now, these are the folks that truly overpaid for college and got nothing for it. And they're looking at him going, wow, I do not want to be in that position. Now, Gen Z is going into college, or I think some of them, the older part of the generation, starting to come out of college. And they have absolutely no desire to be in debt for the rest of their lives for a piece of paper. If
Well, a
colleges
piece of
don't start,
paper is great. No, no, a piece of paper is great. And I saw a great YouTube video. It was a comical piece. A college graduate, 1955. Come on, sit down, Johnny. What can we do for you? Now it's, then fast forward 2024, and it's like, hey, could you mind coming back tomorrow? I'm kind of busy. I'm on the phone. Basically, supply and demand. There was a time when that piece of paper was basically a turnkey to a life, at least of middle class existence. I don't think there's any guarantee, and that's why it's lost much of its relevance.
No, there's no guarantee of that at all anymore. But again, it is supply and demand. College graduates now are a dime a dozen.
That's what I'm saying. Yes.
Yeah, doesn't matter which college they went to. The piece of paper does not mean anything anymore. And people are also starting to realize that they were wrong-headed about the college education. Remember, if you go back to the 50s, and certainly earlier than that, the college education was your key off the farm. We had a huge agricultural base in this country, and people wanted to get off the farm. It was farming is hard work. So they encouraged their kids to go to college so that they had more options rather than just being on the farm the way they were. Well,
Plus
now
the
people,
GI Bill.
right, the GI Bill was a big help to that. But now people are starting to realize wait a minute, you know what? We need farmers. Nobody, especially post COVID, people started realizing we need farmers. We need construction people. We need electricians. We don't need a marketing person. We don't need an MBA. The only need that colleges fill right now are engineers, doctors,
True.
and
Yep.
and scientific researchers. That's it.
100%. And I think that's really going to be the attrition in colleges. If you're not focused and you're not prime in that, all these business schools and liberal, check please. It's
If
just not. It's not viable. It's
if
not
you are
viable.
if you are not going to college for a STEM career, your piece of paper is worthless.
Thank you very much. And just to reiterate, again, being someone that is hiring and in always looking what the marketplace is, just to reiterate that we were not being flippant, Dr. Lopkin, correct? That a degree in marketing, that about 50 cents will get you a cup of coffee. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is. The fact of the matter is there's too many of them around. You know, especially in things like marketing, English degrees. These were degrees that people took because they didn't want to do math. Well, guess what? Businesses need people that can do math. People need
One,
Businesses need people
100%.
who can communicate, which they're not being taught in English and marketing classes anymore. When I took marketing classes in when I was in college, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, we were taught how to communicate. We had to be able to define who our audience was, understand their needs, and speak to them in a language they could relate to. This is not being done anymore. People are basically being taught how to be social media influencers. And you know what? That's another industry that could go by the wayside and no one will miss them.
100%. Now, for our focus subject, just to give you some background, we have the Biden scandal that is started out kind of like a ha kind of a thing. And now it's, as Jade Tapper said, and you read the book so you can articulate it even further, it's bigger than Watergate, which I solely agree with. You have the cancer cover up. You have the Dems paying consultants $20 million plus for information on how to relate to men. Um, and having focus groups where they, word associations. What do you associate Republicans with if you're looking at animals And they're all predatory animals, dominant animals, alpha animals like lions, tigers. And what do you think of Democrats? Slugs, whatever,
Yeah,
basically passive animals. And then just a couple other things is, last thing is, and you look at what's going on. We talked about the wrong track, wrong track, right track. It's the highest been positively with Trump in office, over 50 or about 50% right now. Right track, highest in 29 years. His approval rating by some measures are 55%. Um, what is a situation with the Democratic Party, especially when you have psychos leading the ship or steering the ship, and you also have initiatives that just came out like boycotting July 4th and the parade. Women's in sports. It's, defending 80-20 propositions. It's really not just hyperbole. It doesn't look good for the Democrats.
no, it doesn't
And
look good for the Democrats. And there's a couple of things that fed into this. And, you know, to start, I mean, you brought in a lot of things here. So to start off with, that survey that the New York Times reported was absolutely amazing. This was not even a survey of the general public. This was a survey of registered Democrats. And they
I believe it,
said
by the way.
they they identified the Democratic Party as snails, tortoises, and sloths was
Yeah,
the
that's
other
it.
one that they identified. Meanwhile, they identified the Republican Party with lions, tigers, and sharks. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's one hell of a difference in the image of the core Democrat. Because
Let me
again,
interject one other thing about that is when you think about this, just think about marketing in Nike. When you have the sloths and the passive, that's old. Okay, those are old people that you associate those type of attributes. Sharks, tigers, that's youth. Am I not correct?
well, it's not just youth.
It is youth.
It's act it's
No, it's
act
youth.
it's
No, it's
activity.
youth.
No,
No,
it's
but it's
not.
you. It's not only. It's not only youth, but it is associated with youth. Slots, these docile are older, retired, and I think that's really indicative of where the parties are because the Democrats have all the Woodstock generation, and the Republicans are increasingly building up steam with younger people.
Yeah, the Republicans are building up steam with younger people, but they have no shortage of octogenarians on the Republican side either. The difference is not about age, it's about getting things done. Nobody wants to play for a sports team called the Sloths. They want to be
Agreed with
on,
that. Yes.
they want to be on the Sharks. They want to be on the Tigers. Well, maybe not the Detroit Tigers, but that's another story. Um,
Hmm.
but it's about activity. It's about aggression. It's about focus. That's how
Youthful
people
traits.
that's how people view the different parties. And the fact of the matter is, the Democrats completely did this to themselves. The Biden cover up was only part of the problem, but it was a major part. But there was another problem that went along that Democrats have started talking about just over the past few weeks. And obviously, Jake Tapper did not talk about this in the book because nobody started talking about this until well after the book had been finished and sent to the publisher. The Democrats have not held a legitimate primary since 2008. That was the last time the voters chose who was going to represent the Democrats for president. After
Aren't they
they
trying to protect themselves from themselves?
they are. I
Given
mean,
their constituency, you would get a psycho like Sanders or like Warren, which would lose every state. Over. Goodbye.
which honestly wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing to happen to them because
It'd be therapeutic.
at least that way they could go, well, look, we did what you wanted and you cost us everything. So now the grown-ups are going to enter the room and we're going to do things right. But the Democrats have this theory. And I heard a number of people talk about it previously, and Tapper talks about the DNC doing this in the book. They said, well, Biden decided he was going to run for reelection. So since he's the incumbent, we're not going to have a primary. When did that happen? Ted Kennedy primaried Jimmy Carter because Carter wasn't doing well. Mitt Romney primaried George H.W. Bush when he was the incumbent. Um,
Well, actually, Reagan primaried Ford.
Yes, that was the
Yes,
other
he
one.
did.
Reagan primaried Ford when he was the incumbent. If a president is seriously doing a good job, he can survive a primary challenge.
Might
If
even
he's
help him.
Right, if he's not doing a good job, he doesn't deserve to survive a primary challenge. The idea that the president should say, "No, we're not having a primary." And a lot of them are going, well, Trump didn't have a primary in 2020. Well, first of all, you had COVID, and you did have a couple people running against him. But the fact of the matter is, he was doing such a good job, the Republicans didn't want to run against him. It
And
wasn't
that's
the
happened before. That happened with Clinton back in
right.
'94. No one, 96, I'm sorry. No one primaried him because he was doing such a great job. That is correct. And also, you look at 2020, 2024, 2023, I should say. Trump was primaried by many people. So,
Yes.
but the real situation is, though, I don't see it correcting itself in the near term. I
The
think until they get their head handed to them, I think it's going. I think the 20 and Tapper is right, and others for the 2026 election. I see this scandal, not just the craziness of the Democratic Party. This scandal is going to play very pervasively in the midterms.
Yes, it will.
How can you
Because
trust a party that lied to you?
well, not just that. Because they didn't all lie. They were all complicit in one way or another. But based on the information in Original Sin, which was Jake Tapper's book, you had different groups of Democrats doing different things that all resulted in the major Biden cover-up. You had what they're calling the Politburo. These were the people that were actively covering up Biden's failures. And let's be clear, despite the fact that at the beginning of the book, Jake Tapper said the majority of the cover up and, and Biden's decline happened between 2023 and 2024. His own reporting in the book said people started seeing signs of it in 2015. This is one of the
Okay.
this is one of the
It did
reasons
not.
he didn't run in 2016.
Yes, and it did not start mid semester or midterm for him. Uh, we talked about this, on the podcast, terrestrial radio, what have you, that had the basement. They didn't have the basement. Yeah, COVID. They didn't have the basement strategy because he was Einstein. Hello,
Right.
no, he was out of his mind then. But isn't it? So look at the repercussions of this. They were willing to jeopardize America, jeopardize the world economically, from a safety perspective, just to maintain power. Every party wants to maintain power, but there are levels to a degree of complicity. And I also think that talked about careers gone by. Uh, Jill Biden, usually, if a first lady, charismatic, whatever, can write some books, maybe get some time on news shows and other things like that. She's gone.
No,
Goodbye.
the big names in the cover up, their careers are done. Jill Biden is one of them. You'll notice
Goodbye.
every press secretary from a president has gone into the media except Corinne Jean Pierre. Nobody will touch her. She's
Good
done.
point. But how about with her predecessor? I mean, she's not doing well. I think as this scandal, this is getting more legs, not less. I think she's gone too. The ginger chick.
Yeah, Jen Psaki is going to have
Yeah,
to
she's done.
explain how she did not see this. Now, yes, the Politburo, and I'll be honest with you, the folks that were actually behind all of this, according to what Tapper was able to write about, were not the usual suspects. These were not people that anybody knew their names. These were close Biden confidants. These were folks that had worked with him for years. Now, that's something else that should have been a clue. Biden's sister ran Biden's campaigns up until 2020. And in 2020, she said, no, this is a bad idea. I'm not going to be involved in it. So even his family knew what was going on. Now, you did have different levels of complicity. You had the Politburo that was absolutely behind the cover up. Then you had folks like Schumer at that, Pelosi at that level, that they knew what was going on,
Obama.
but they knew that confronting Biden about it would tear the party apart, and they didn't want to lose their power. Then you've actually got lower level government employees. These aren't people with any power. This is just these are the folks doing their job. A number of them came forward to say they were actually threatened by the Politburo, that they were going to ruin their lives if they said anything negative about Biden. And several reporters, not big name reporters, but several reporters also talked to Jake Tapper and said they were also threatened that they would never have access again if they spoke out against Biden. So this wasn't just a group of Democratic sympathizers saying, oh, we have to protect the party. These were folks that were trying to protect their own self-interest against a Biden administration that was doing exactly what they kept accusing Trump of doing. And honestly, and this surprised me, do you know who I ended up feeling sorry for after reading this book? Merrick Garland. Garland
Hmm.
Garland was in over his head. He should never have been given the job, but Biden made assurances to him that if he took the job, he would not have to deal with any politics. All he would have to do is protect the law. And he wasn't in office for more than a few months when the Biden administration started pressuring him to protect the Biden name. And he didn't know what to do or how to handle it.
Well, a couple very salient questions. Number one, Biden legacy already weak before this really exploded. I think he'll go down as a footnote and in the bottom 10% of presidents. Agree or not?
Definitely in the bottom 10%. And, that's something else that should be mentioned. In the time period that Tapper mentioned where things got really bad with Biden from 23 to 24, not only was Biden unaware of his own deterioration, which is common for folks in this situation. It has
Sure.
nothing to do with Biden, himself. This is just what happens. The folks around him did not tell him what was going on with the electorate, did not let him see any polls, did not even let him hear about issues that were going on. They completely isolated him. So he
How
had
about the
no
auto
clue.
pen?
He had no
How
clue.
about the auto pen?
I don't think he had any clue the auto pen was even being used. And as for
Does it negate some of his initiatives?
honestly, that's a legal question that I don't have the answer to, but I would assume that it would, because something that the Politburo kept falling back on, and they kept telling Democrats this, and it is assuredly 100% false, is that, oh, when people vote for the president, they're not just voting for the president, they're voting for the people around him. No,
No, no, no,
these
no,
were
no.
unelected people that were taking power that did not belong to them. And which is, again, completely ironic given the Democrats' temper tantrum over Elon Musk, because Elon Musk didn't actually have any power. He went out, found the information, and then went to Trump and said, "Here's what we found. Here's a recommendation." And Trump made the decision because that's his job.
I would agree with 100%. As we look at the ramifications, worse than Watergate, yes or no? Again,
Yes, without a question. I mean,
um,
you're talking about the difference between a party. Actually, I don't even know. Again, I was pretty young when Watergate happened, but you have the committee to reelect the president, which by the way, worst acronym ever. Uh but you had that group spying on their opposition to get a leg up in an election. They didn't try to lie to any courts to get FISA warrants or anything like that. Of course, the FISA court didn't exist back then. But it was a whole bunch of dirty tricks to win an election. This was literally endangering the lives of Americans. And numerous people in the Biden administration have now come out and said, if you remember the Hillary Clinton campaign commercial, who do you want answering the phone at 3 a.m.? Biden was completely incapable of answering a 3 a.m. emergency.
I agree. I think it put our country and the world, like we talked about, in a perilous position. And I also think, though, I get back to Ted Cruz. He said this before the scandal ever broke out, maybe a year into Biden's administration, and how left he turned. He goes, he's not in charge. You got a bunch of Trotskyites who went, 30-year-old Trotskyites from Harvard doing. There was no one guarding the henhouse. They could
Okay,
auto pen. Yes, go ahead.
Ted Cruz was actually wrong about that. It wasn't a group of 30-year-old Trotskyites. The Trotskyite was one of this Politburo, one of 6 people who was a Biden confidant. He was the one, and hang on, because I've got his actual name here, if I can find it.
Was it Ron Klain?
Yes, it was Ron Klain. He was the one that was pushing things to the left, and he was the one that was telling these 30-year-olds what to do. So, yeah, it wasn't the 30-year-old Trotskyites. It was one of the Politburo, as they called them. So, yeah,
Now let me ask you a question. How good at TV and what kind of repercussions are going to happen if, and there's a strong possibility and when, they have a congressional hearing, including the people that we've just mentioned.
Uh,
Plain, even they've talked about Dr. Jill, the whole list. I think the damage could be unimaginable
the damage is going to be severe at best. Um, and yes,
to
they've
the point
already
of 2026. I
possible.
do
And
believe that.
if 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 Congress works quickly enough. Now, here's the thing, though, and a number of Republican congressmen have already said this. They said Congress is going to, especially the Oversight Committee, is going to be looking into this. However, they said this point blank: Congress is not good at this. They are not good at investigations. They need to be able to get just enough evidence so that the Justice Department can take a look, because that's where the investigators are. And that was something else. This came out in the book, was another factor that made this so bad was Biden's doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Biden's doctor was a family friend. He saw Biden all of the time. And because of this, he actually stated, "Oh, I can see, what's going on, so I don't have to run all of these tests." So
Good idea, huh?
he was never given cognitive tests because the doctor was his friend and he didn't feel it was necessary. He also, it came out, never got a PSA test, which is why suddenly he has stage 4 cancer, because it's been over 15 years since he got a PSA test. Men
To
are
some
supposed
degree, good.
men are supposed to get a PSA test at
Yeah, like
most,
40.
well, starting at their 40s, but they're supposed to get it every year, two at the most. And he went 14 years without having one.
In some ways, I don't like the son of a bitch, but you got to kind of have some empathy, sympathy for Uncle Joe. I mean, when you look at the final years of his life, a failed president, a disgraced president, a president. One thing about being president, obviously, we've never been a president, but I can only imagine the accolades, the opportunities to go places and do things and interact in certain. It's over. It's over.
Yes, well, I mean, yes, his legacy is over, but
But
again,
his life
give,
is over.
given the events of the past few years, I don't know that that's going to affect him any. I don't know how much he's actually aware of anymore. I mean,
Good point.
they prop him up periodically to make an appearance, and those appearances are, becoming fewer and fewer, because one, every time he does it, it just brings the story back to the forefront, because he can't,
Yeah, that doesn't
do
work
it
anymore.
anymore. And two, because his health does not justify him doing this anymore. So at this point, I don't even know how much he's aware of the damage that is done. Now, Jill is fully
Jill is.
aware. She's probably miserable because she wanted to be back in the White House.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as far as I can tell, the only one that didn't want to be back in the White House was Michelle Obama. She was the only one complaining how terrible it was to be in the White House.
Let's close on that because I think that's interesting. Let's close on a lighter note. Have you ever seen a more self absorbed, entitled, out of touch person than Michelle? It just boggles the mind. There's people that barely put bread on the table, have situations that would blow your mind, and she's complaining that they had to pay for meals and that sometimes she had to actually pick up a phone. I don't know what's going on with her, but her old legacy, whatever, no legacy, whatever, her persona, unless except for the true believers, it's not the nice Michelle. That shit's over with.
No,
She's really a bitter, angry piece of shit. If you want my honest opinion.
that ship has sailed. Her You know,
She's a
the nice
miserable person.
the nice guy image is gone. And I think, I've heard over the last couple days there's a lot of controversy going on about the fact that schools are not teaching history anymore. Well, for those of our listeners that remember learning history in class, I think it all comes down to one statement, and you could see Michelle actually saying it: let them eat cake.
I love that. Perfect. Well, Dr. Lopkin, a lot to unpack. I think the story, we'll probably revisit this probably next week. The whole Biden cover up and the state of the Democratic Party. It's something that is we're not just belaboring a point. I mean, it's a once in a generation occurrence. I've never seen this happen. I wasn't around with the Whigs, but it's 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 moving towards that.
Yeah, no, this is historical, and yes,
Historic.
we are going to keep covering it because new information keeps coming out about it. The story's not going to go anywhere, so we do need to keep doing new commentary and new analysis on it as more comes out. And of course, the more that comes out, we don't want to just hear what our analysis is. We want to hear what our listeners have to say. So we want all of you. Go to the Carnivore Radio Facebook page, message us. Go to xvadio.com/connect. Send us an email saying what you think of all of this that's going on. You know, what do you think is the real story, and how do you feel about it? And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites at xvadio.com, the Carnivore Radio website, Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
Great show, Dr. Lopkin. See you next week.
We'll see you then.